So let's get started. Again, I have a little bit of a what we call a topper here for everyone who's watching, and welcome aboard. Let's see here. All right, to begin, as Secretary Rubio made clear yesterday, Venezuela is obligated to accept its repatriated citizens from the United States. This is not an issue for debate or negotiation, nor does it merit any reward. Unless the Maduro regime accepts a consistent flow of deportation flights, without further excuses or delays, the U.S. will impose new, severe, and escalating sanctions. As President Trump made clear in his proclamation, TDA is closely associated, closely aligned with, and indeed has infiltrated the Maduro regime. Maduro maintains close ties to regime-sponsored narco-terrorists. The Maduro regime must accept back all Venezuelan aliens deported by the United States, especially their murderers, rapists, criminals, human traffickers, and other illegally present criminals in the United States. End of discussion. We will impose new and more severe sanctions upon any failure to do so or delays. Let me be clear, the United States government will enforce the laws of the United States. We will deport illegal aliens from our country, and we will have made clear that we expect countries to accept their nationals illegally present in the United States. We thank our partners in our region and around the world who are partnering with us to stop illegal immigration and combat vicious transnational crime. These efforts help all of us by making our entire region safer and more secure. On the Russia-Ukraine conflict, President Trump spoke with President Putin yesterday. As President Trump said, it was a good and productive phone conversation. Both President Trump and President Putin agreed on the need for this conflict to end with a lasting peace. They agreed, quote, the movement to peace will begin with an energy and infrastructure ceasefire, as well as technical negotiations on implementation of a maritime ceasefire in the Black Sea, full ceasefire and permanent peace. Today, President Trump spoke with President Zelensky. As President Trump said, it was, quote, a very good telephone call, with much of the discussion based on the call made yesterday with President Putin in order to align both Russia and Ukraine in terms of their requests and needs. In addition to these conversations, everybody's talking. Special Envoy Witkoff met with Putin last week. Last weekend, Secretary Rubio spoke with Foreign Minister Lavrov. And, of course, Secretary Rubio and National Security Advisor Waltz met with the Ukrainian delegation in Jeddah. Negotiations will continue in Saudi Arabia in the coming days. On reports of Russian strikes on civilian infrastructure overnight, attacks like these are precisely why President Trump is committed to peace. It is time for the death and destruction to stop and for an end to this senseless war. As Secretary Rubio has said, there is no military solution to this war. All sides need to move to a ceasefire. President Trump has made this clear as well. We cannot get to the table for negotiations to end the war without a ceasefire in place. The shooting has to stop first. Finally, we'd like to welcome home the NASA astronauts, Butch Wilmore and Suni Williams, which, of course, we all watched yesterday. It was a remarkable scene with the dolphins that greeted them in the ocean also getting their own time on television. It was a fabulous event, and it reminded us about the nature of the 21st century, the modern age, and how progress continues. Now, you also have, that's the opening here of what I've seen, of course, over the last 24, 48 hours. Of course, there's always something that feels like it should have been a month of news that is happening on a daily basis. But we also have a direct statement, which I'm going to read to you as well, and to those who are watching from home or from their offices and from around the world, a statement from Secretary Rubio and the National Security Advisor, Mike Waltz. And this also directly addresses some issues that we're expecting to come up, certainly in the next week, and the nature of where things stand at this point. And so here is that statement from the Secretary of State and the National Security Advisor. Today, President Donald J. Trump and Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelensky had a fantastic phone conversation. President Zelensky thanked President Trump for a productive start for the work of the Ukrainian and American teams in Jeddah on March 11th. The meeting of the senior officials from both nations significantly helped in moving toward ending the war. President Zelensky thanked President Trump for the support of the United States, especially the Javelin missiles that President Trump was first to provide, and his efforts towards peace. The leaders agreed Ukraine and America will continue working together to bring about a real end to the war, and that lasting peace under President Trump's leadership can be achieved. President Trump fully briefed President Zelensky on his conversation with Russian President Putin and the key issues discussed. They reviewed the situation in Kursk and agreed to share information closely between their defense staffs in the battlefield situation as the battlefield situation evolved. President Zelensky asked for additional air defense systems to protect his civilians, particularly Patriot missile systems. President Trump agreed to work with him to find what was available, particularly in Europe. The two leaders also agreed on a partial ceasefire against energy. The technical teams will meet in Saudi Arabia in the coming days to discuss broadening the ceasefire to the Black Sea on the way to a full ceasefire. They agreed this could be the first step toward the full end of the war and ensuring security. So let me just remind you here that that is technical teams. It will not be principals going to those negotiations. President Zelensky was grateful for the president's leadership in this effort and reiterated his willingness to adopt a full ceasefire. President Trump also discussed Ukraine's electrical supply and nuclear power plants. He said that the United States could be very helpful in running those plants with its electricity and utility expertise. American ownership of those plants would be the best protection for that infrastructure and support for the Ukrainian energy infrastructure. President Zelensky also thanked President Trump for continuing to push humanitarian concerns, including the exchange of POWs. He noted that they had just had a successful exchange and thanked the president for his leadership. President Trump also asked President Zelensky about the children who have gone missing from Ukraine during the war, including the ones that had been abducted. President Trump promised to work closely with both parties to help make sure those children were returned home. They agreed all parties must continue the effort to make a ceasefire work. The presidents noted the positive work of their advisors and representatives, especially Secretary Rubio, National Security Advisor Waltz, Special Envoy Kellogg, and others. The presidents instructed their teams to move ahead with the technical issues related to implementing and broadening the partial ceasefire. The presidents instructed their advisors and representatives to carry out this work as quickly as possible. The presidents emphasized that in further meetings, the teams can agree on all necessary aspects of advancing toward lasting peace and security.